Cameron Stewart of Locked On Baylor. Because your university was saved by Ann Richards in the 90s, you get to be a part of this conversation. And I don't want to bring in Parker Ainsworth because of his red-colored goggles. Instead, it's going to be somebody who's been in the Big 12 for a long time. When Houston and UCF were first brought to this conference, a reporter from Baylor came on the show and said, neither of those schools deserve to be in the Big 12. This is overall a loss for the league. Now that Houston's in the Final Four, which they also did in the AAC, by the way, they also represented that conference in 2021, losing to Baylor in the Final Four. Now that Houston's in the Final Four, the football success has not been there. Basketball has dominated the league, and without Houston, basketball will be a lot more chaotic. Who knows what about it? Like they've walked in and taken over our trap entirely. No one's been able to compete with them. Without that, the Big 12's wide open in basketball. Maybe get a couple more teams in because the league looks deeper. When a team goes 19-1, that's tough on pretty much everybody. Is Houston overall a great asset for the Big 12? Do they deserve to be in this league?
Let me add to that last point first before answering the question here, because I find this very interesting. Those of us who have watched Big 12 basketball for a long time, like the quality of Big 12 basketball has been pretty elite for like 10 or 11 years here. But when did you start hearing about it? Like 5-6 years ago. And then this year, you don't hear about it as much. You hear about the SEC. And I think there's no mistake in that, because 10 years ago, as good as the rest of the Big 12 was, who was winning it every year? The Kansas Jayhawks. Yes, thank you. And then in that 5-year stretch, it was not a foregone conclusion. Baylor was great. Kansas State tied them for the league title one year.
Texas Tech, national champion.
Texas Tech goes to the national championship game. Yes. And so there's all that. And now you're not hearing about it as much anymore because back-to-back years, the Houston Cougars have ran this thing into the ground in a good way for them, right? They've crushed everybody else, even though the Big 12 is still pretty damn good. The Houston Cougars have had a liftoff the last couple years. Is Houston bad for the Big 12? I wouldn't say it's.
Can I go here because it seems like you're still contemplating a bet.
A bit, yeah.
Houston belongs in the Big 12. If the question is posed to me, is Houston a good fit? Do they belong? Should they be there? The answer is yes. Region being literally regionality is a big part of this. That's where I was going. Having another Texas school added into this fold with the potential to grow and become a major piece of that market. Now the issue right now is, and bear with me here, Houston. Provo, they love BYU. It's like the one thing to do, right?
This is a big point. Yeah.
Go to Temple and love on BYU. In Lubbock, Texas, dear God in heaven, it is only Texas Tech. Like that's legitimately it. That and like 2 Allsups. And in Houston,
Holly.
People are going to see the Houston Symphony Orchestra more than they are, by and large, a Tuesday night Houston basketball game against Grambling State. You know, it's very tough to compete with a major city who relies on the Astros and the Texans much more than they do this university. And that it hurts you. It's hard. Boston College, which isn't necessarily in Boston, but it's like people are like, oh, well, yeah, they're in Boston, so we added them. It's great, right? Now we have the Boston market.
It's not.
Not really,
there is no
actually.
Market.
So that's where Houston's great for the Big 12 because they have that name, Houston, a major, massive city, but it's still tough to derive Houston itself from that university because there are so many shows that are bigger in the town.
You son of a took my entire damn point here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, yeah, I mean, that's the point, right? So does Houston belong in the Big 12? They absolutely belong in the same conference as Baylor, Tech, and TCU. Yes. 100% they do. But in terms of that, that's where I think people get it misconstrued, is they think Houston, the same thing for SMU and Dallas, right? Yes. They just don't have the name right there. I mean, try as they might to put it all over their uniforms.
And I'd rather have TCU in Fort Worth than I would SMU in Dallas.
Yes.
Certainly no one wants to go to SMU games.
Right. And so it's not, you're not adding this major market. Like for all intents and purposes, you had the Houston market for the Big 12. And I think you already have Dallas as well. I mean, that's basically the headquarters of
Tech
it.
grads, Baylor grads, yeah.
Correct. Those are in Houston as well. You know, they're not all UH people. And obviously A&M was a huge spot for it before they left for the SEC. So trust me, as someone who did grow up in Boston, like there is no market for college football and college basketball. Just because you add a team like that does not mean you're getting that. And so that's not a slight on Houston. It's a pro sports town, and it just is. And honestly, the last 10 years, maybe more than ever, with the rampant success of the Astros. So yes, they deserve to be in here, but it's not this major upgrade that I think a lot of people outside the Big 12 bubble think it is. It makes a bunch of sense to have Houston in there, but it doesn't add a ton. They're not very good at football. They don't have a huge fan base. They're not. It's not an intimidating place to play in football, and in basketball it is, but we'll see when they're, just the third or fourth best team in the Big 12. And by the way, this is coming from someone who went to a school that's not very big, that isn't great in football every year, and does not have the best fan base in the Big 12 in terms of their attendance. And that's just how it is, but these teams deserve to be with each other. But I wouldn't say anyone is saying Houston is this giant upgrade to the Big 12. Just like in normal years, you wouldn't be saying that Baylor is a huge upgrade to the Big 12, but this is where they should be.
Yeah. And for
they
Houston
shouldn't be
fans,
playing UConn. Cincinnati, that's a different. Cincinnati shouldn't be in this conference.
For Houston fans that are upset by the conversation, I want to lean again on that point. The Baylor in every third year is not an upgrade for the conference, is not something that the conference leans.
At this point, TCU, the same thing.
Yes.
Without Gary Patterson there.
Colorado sans Deion Sanders would not have been an upgrade or a major piece for the Big 12. They were terrible in football for 15 consecutive years. So it's not as if Houston's being picked on. This same conversation could go for probably half of the Big 12 based on how they perform year over year in any given revenue sport. For Houston, I'll give you the solace of, if Ann Richards didn't exist, if Houston had been a part of when the Big 8 in the Southwest Conference said, let's do this thing together and go to 12, and the Cougars were a part of that, this is a much different conversation. Now we're talking about a school that is on par, quite possibly, with a Texas Tech, who's on par with Kansas State, who's on par with Iowa State. They weren't given that opportunity. They haven't been a power school for decades, and it will take time. You're fighting an uphill battle, because then you could have just merged with other universities that were on your level. But you and Rice got left out, and now Rice is completely irrelevant in college sports. I'd rather have Houston than Rice, but you're looking at a Houston school that just didn't get a fair shake. So we're not trying to bully. This is partially because of what happened 30 years ago.
Yeah, and the kind of irony there is that Baylor really benefited from being in the Big 12 all those years, even though they weren't very good for the first 15 years of it. But they really benefited from having that revenue back in the days where you built a program based off, okay, you get a good coach, you get some great facilities, and you get people invested, and that's how you win. That's what Baylor did. And of course, the great irony is they took their coach from Houston to finally be good at football. So, it's a different discussion in 2025 for sure.
I think so. BYU just hired a new women's basketball coach, as did Arizona State. The Big 12 is moving forward with a new era of women's basketball where it matters a lot, and I think you're going to like the conversation. That's next on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Look, I'm 24, man. I don't really know what I'm doing. The whole money thing, it's just kind of there, and then one day it's gone. And why is it gone? Well, I spent $40 trying to have food delivery to my hotel room of 6 Bang energy drinks. If you ever check your bank account and wonder where did it go, Monarch Money is here to be your own personal CFO. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's complete financial command. It's that center that helps you start building wealth. When I started using Monarch Money, I realized how much I was spending on just random stuff that didn't matter. So I stopped, because now it was very apparent to me. Instead of juggling multiple apps, use Monarch Money to track finances, track spending, even plan long-term goals with your partner. By the way, you can share these goals and stay on the same page. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year at Monarch Money.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.